coming. It's a gloomy day today, I know, but thanks for persevering through the weather and coming along anyway and joining us here at Velir. Just wanted to do a quick 15-minute on the Sitecore Item Web API. I'm just going to lean more towards the front-end side of it, and Ben's going to do some more back-end, and Mike is surprised, so we'll see what he can do it. I'll do it later. Yeah, so basically the impetus came from me having a little downtime here at Velir and wanted to brush up a little on my JavaScript skills, which at the time were a bit rusty. So I played around with Angular a little bit, and I don't know if there are any Angular people in the house, but I think it's great. I think it's great. So I wanted to get brush up some Angular skills too, and with the added bonus of learning the Sitecore Web API, since we are a Sitecore house here at Velir. So let me move on. So get a little browser nostalgia here, but this is a very simple round trip that you make when you use the Item Web API. SQL Navigator 2.02 makes an HTTP request. Goes out to Sitecore. Sitecore just passes it back as JSON. It's fairly simple, and you can do whatever you want with that. So here's the typical request form. There's 3 different ways that you can get an item out of Sitecore with the API. Very flexible, and there's all sorts of different options you can get. So you can get a little bit of data, you get a lot of data from it. You can get by ID or path, or even by a query. And query is where things can get a little dangerous. You can get back a lot more data than you anticipated. So you need to be careful sometimes when you're calling by query. But every request has the same format, just your host name dash item v1, and then you pass in your either your ID or your path or your query. It's actually fairly simple. And you have a few additional parameters that you can introduce. You can get by version, language, you get by database, and I think some of the real power here is in the next section, payload, scope, and fields. That's when you can really narrow down what kind of data you're looking for out of your items. So you don't want to be grabbing a giant, very complex item from here. Or if you are, you can be sure not to slam the browser with too much data by specifying your payload. So you get the minimum content, which I believe this returns the name and the ID. It's good. You can get content, which is just fields on the item, and you can get full, which has standard fields in addition to the content fields. You can also set scopes, pretty self-evident. You can get itself, its parent, or the children item. It's not recursive children, but I believe Mike had a talk before about that, or maybe that's what you're covering today. I believe something along those lines, correct?
It's supposed to be surprised.
I knew that.
I wrote a blog post about it. You basically customize it down to your own scope, your own axes, and definitely I did that for recursion. Here you got a whole content train inside.
Right.
It's very slow.
It's very slow. Maybe in the future you give a talk about how to speed that up. So you can also get back specific fields, and they're just pipe delimited. So any field that you want, you get in that format shown below. So without any further ado, let's make a blog post. So a little background for this. I think what I started to realize about the power of the Item Web API is that you can decouple content editors, or rather content creators. Say, the typical example is a blog post maker. We all understand what a blog post is, instead of some esoteric concept that we probably actually do day to day. But blog post creators have a title field, some content, maybe an image, and that's what I've recreated here in my front end that I'll show you in a second. So I think it's a little bit too much maybe for a person just making a simple post like that to have to log into Sitecore, have to go into the content editor, maybe edit those fields. There's a lot of upfront learning that you need to know about Sitecore before you can even start to create this content. So I was thinking, well, what if you could create a front end that's decoupled from the concept of knowing about Sitecore at all, and allow content creators to create their content right from there. So let me switch on over. Okay. So here we are. are, oops, very bright. So hopefully it will become clear what's going on here in a second. So, okay. Okay, so I just have a very simple front end. Very simple. And this is just done through Angular. These two fields are two-way data bound. So Sitecore, Angular knows about these, and I can just pass them right through when I create my blog post. So I'm going to go ahead and create a post, but let's pick an image first. I don't know if you are aware of the Luigi death stare. I'm a big fan. And we're going to Luigi, we're going to get some boilerplate text. You bake in Lipson. We're going to attempt to do it again. There we go. And I'm going to scroll down, and here's my create button. So we'll just hit create here. And once that's done, I didn't wire in some nice, like, hey, you did a post yet. I'm sorry, I'll get to that later for another talk. And so we'll go to the Sitecore tree, we'll refresh this, and our item has been created. This is all done front end, no back end code involved. And you can see the title I just put in, the content, and the image. And if you look at the raw values for the image in my my code, my JavaScript, I'm just literally creating this from the returned JSON when I make the image. When I upload it, it returns the GUID, and then from that GUID, I can just create this image tag and just insert it right in. The other thing that happens is if you go to the media library, refresh, it puts the image right there for you. Now, one thing that I didn't get time to do was actually have this on create also publish. Now, I know you can get this item from the master, but I'm just going to publish this now, so that when I pull it back down, we'll see it. And I'll show you that in a second. So, if we go back here, I have, this is my create post view. This is my create post Angular view. And then I also have a button to get my blog post. So, I have a field here that just allows me to put in any path. And so I'm just going to put in the location of my Luigi blog, pull it, and then it gets pulled down right there. Now, the cool thing, or at least what I envision this side of the app, being, is you would have someone who's going to be the content editor. So the creator posts it, then the content editor pulls it back down, and they're able to make changes and even possibly send it back to the content creator. So these are all editable, content editable fields. So I can just do Luigi Mario, hit save, and when I go back to the Sitecore tree, it says Luigi Mario. So that's it, and this is all done, all front-end code. So let me go into the code. So we have one Angular person in the house, it seems. I'm not going to get, some more.
He's got enough enthusiasm for food.
Cool. Well, maybe we hope we can talk after about it. So I'm not going to get too much into how Angular works or anything like that. It's a JavaScript MVC framework. It's amazing. And it's basically magic to me. But what happens here is I just have my, let's not go into the HTML files. But basically when I hit the buttons, it's calling first my upload image function here.
Maybe, can you make the text a little bit bigger?
Oh, yeah, sure. Is that Control++?
Yeah, 100% to the bottom of the corner.
Oh, thanks, man. Let's try 150. Is that a little better? Yeah, great. So, I have my upload image function. Through Angular, you're able to, in a plugin called Ajax Form, you're able to get the file from the input just as an object. And I grab the name, and then as we saw before, just pass that into the HTTP request here, set my database where I want it to go, we ignore the fact that the authentication is in plain text, and we move on. So we just, I use Angular. I use a couple things. Angular's HTTP post was the only way I was reliably able to get the image uploading to work correctly, so I just stuck with that. But I used regular Ajax, jQuery Ajax, to do the other stuff. So I just have a promise here that I get the response back. The response is just a JSON of the returned item, the returned image object. And the reason I did the image first is I need to ensure that the image is, it's going to take longer for the image, of course, to get into Sitecore than text is. So I have to ensure that my image is there before I try to associate that with the post itself. So then I just go ahead and create a post. Now, what I did here inside of this file is I just wrapped up all of the functions that you're able to do through the HTTP, through the Item Web API, just in a nice little wrapper here that I can call from my, and I could have decoupled it from the Angular app so I can pass this around. And I set up a couple objects here. One's the Ajax settings base, and this is the most common stuff I'm going to do when I'm making this post. Generally, you're going to be doing a get most of the time. At least I was. So you just set that up. You're passing through JSON, of course. We've got our totally private authentication. And then you can just set up your options, like here, like you saw on the slide before. These are the standard options. And then I just, that was the old upload image. That one did not work originally, so forget about that one. But here, if we scroll down, I create my item. Here I just pass in that image data, I construct it, and just pass it right to the image field. So all this is some serialized JSON that's just passed through. And I pass that in through the data, through the HTTP post. I just make my call, and that's it. It's pretty easy stuff, and it's really powerful. So I think that's going to conclude my section. I don't know if anyone have any questions. I don't want to go too deep into the jQuery. What's up?
Do you mind switching the first slide that you showed?
Yeah. This here?
The first slide.
Slide.
Oh, sorry. Which slide were you interested in?
The first one where you showed the path and stuff like that.
Okay.
So when you have the URLs, the endpoints like that, if you remove the content item from Sitecore, do you think the ID changes? And if you expose the endpoint with an ID, if at all you remove or re-add the item, wouldn't the ID changes? Then the consumer also has to have the new ID, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So what's the best practice now? Is it content ID or is it the path? What would be the best in the URL?
So let's see if I understand. So you're saying that an item was put in Sitecore, that item has been moved to somewhere else now. The GUID would stay the same, I believe, if it was moved. So you would want to get it by the GUID. Yeah, I think that would be best practice.
So for any reason, if you remove and re-add that item, then it is going to be a totally new GUID, right?
If you do what to it?
If you remove the if you remove the item and recreate it,
yeah,
it will be a totally new
yes,
ID.
Yeah.
So
I would say it'd be better doing it by app, assuming that it's not going to be moved because it's the best bet. But it really depends on your requirements and what your needs are. It definitely needs to be things up front saying, hey, you can't really mess around with this because it's going to cause problems.
Yeah, I mean, the queries are pretty, I mean, it's just like doing a regular Sitecore query in your search box. I mean, if you know generally what type of items you need, that's probably the best practice, but it depends.
I just have two quick questions. The first one is regarding what the return type is. Is it always JSON?
Mm-hmm.
So it can never be XML, or is it?
That's actually a good question. I think you can return.
You can customize it to return any format that you want.
You did that. Okay.
I wrote a blog post about doing it in YAML, which is fun. But you can actually, one of the cookbooks shows you how to actually make an XML serializer for this.
Right. Okay.
Do you want to see it? I mean, I can just expect it net. Or I mean, it's
Oh,
just.
no, I understand. Just making sure. And also, have you ever had any trouble when it returns anything like an ID that doesn't exist? It's just an empty JSON object, or?
No, I've never had it. If you are searching, or rather trying to pull something that doesn't exist, it gives you a really clear error message in the response.
Okay.
So I do want to add one thing about your first question, though. If you do change the serializer, be aware that Sitecore in 7.2 is using this out of the box. You might break things in Speak. I actually did that myself. I wrote something in Speak. So, be aware that you really need to swap it out, conditional from saying, hey, if I see this in a query string, then use mine. Otherwise, use the out of the box one.
So until I saw your Ajax call, I was wondering how you did authentication, and now I'm wondering if you came across any other ways to do authentication.
Next question. we talk about this a lot.
This is the question he's been dreading.
Sorry.
No, it's totally. I think when you see Ben's methodology, you'll see where the hooks can be for this. There are ways. It's in the documentation. There are ways to do authentication. For this demo, I just didn't get to that portion of it. So.
What happens if you try to manipulate an item without being authenticated?
It will say no. You don't have access to view this item. There's
status code other than 200, or is it?
I think it's 403.
Yeah. So one thing to note too, I actually didn't mention this. I believe before Sitecore version 7.0, you have to install a package to get the Item Web API. It's built in after 7.0, and there's an item, there's a config file, and you set up your security in there. So you can settle anonymous access if you want. I don't know why you would. Or you can set up specific users to have specific access levels through the config.
And one note on that question. So he was doing editing, right? And so I think in that mode, or that kind of, if you're going to do editorial tasks, you would likely pass the login through, right? You're not going to, kind of wire in a default login for those features, in the same way that you log into the editor today, you'd have some sort of form to capture the username and password and pass that through so you don't have to store it. I imagine that's how you'd approach it. You wouldn't want to just have a default login that the application used.
I mean, you're using this externally too, so it's going to be as a service. So you're getting some other authentication as well.
Right. Sitecore does provide.
So if you're setting up the security in this config file, is that compatible with the security in the user manager, or does it supersede that? Or?
No, yeah, it's compatible with that. Yeah, I'm just logging into admin, admin G. We all love that.
You set different permissions for the same user in both places. I'm actually going to ask that. Do you mind if I hijack this?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was doing research into this. So it actually goes by user, it respects user roles and user permissions. If a user cannot see this item in Sitecore, they cannot pull it from the API. It'll give them, depending on what it is, it'll either give you a 403 error, or if it's just like you're querying item and parent, you can't see parent for whatever reason, it just won't show parent. But yeah, you can specifically deny or allow users in Sitecore.
So I went a little over my 15-minute allotment, so I think I'm going to kick it over to Ben now. If that's okay.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Okay.
This is a read-only API, right?
No.
No, you can
Where
read
is the rate?
Oh, I didn't show that function, but yeah, you get post, you can even patch.
Okay, so you weren't. It's not like you had a form defined in Sitecore to receive that file upload. It's part of the web API.
Yes. Okay, that's correct. All right, I kick it off to Ben. Thank you very much, guys.
Oh, beautiful. You're not trusting everything. So, hi. My name is Ben. I have a presentation. So, I'm going to be fixing my display settings. Yeah, you can see it. So, my presentation is called Sitecore Out of Context. It is a way of accessing Sitecore from the back end without Sitecore context. That's a clever name right there. So this is the back-end perspective of the Web API. So why would I do such a thing? So we had an issue come up where a client wanted a small microsite where they didn't need really any of the Sitecore functionality, but they wanted to access a couple of the content items because they already had an existing site. This was just a quick little spin-off. So we wanted to cut down on the bulk, and we came up with this little idea. The project got greenlit and got canceled, but I liked the idea, so I kept running with it. So that's where this came out of. So my goals were to create a backend ASP.NET API to interact with Sitecore. I wanted statically typed items, and I wanted to get the basic create, read, upload, update, and delete. And I wanted to interface it with Glass. 3 out of 4 of those actually worked. Glass did not like it. So how does it work? So you have a little Sitecore controller over here. This is my default MVC controller, and it connects to, or it sends a request to the Sitecore connector, and I did not label any of these. So the Sitecore connector sends a query to Sitecore, and Sitecore sends back the JSON, and Jamie just showed all this from the front end. My Sitecore connector will then send it to an item factory, and that item factory, I'm a fan of unit testing, so I wanted to make everything interfaces instead of giving back like an actual concrete class. So this item factory works some reflection magic and instantiates some interfaces using Castle Dynamic Proxy. Sends it back to the controller, the connector sends it back to the controller, and then we have a front end. And that is the future. So I'm switching over here. This is the beautiful little bootstrappy interface I came up with. So we have, on the left-hand side over here, we have the representation of the Sitecore content tree, which it pulled all from the API. And then over here we have a couple of the fields from the items. So here we can create a child, so I'm going to make a new food called pasta, which with a sort order of 5, the name of it is pasta. Food name is pasta. And the type is pizza. I'm going to create this item. So magically, this item now is here. Yeah, it's been created over here if I refreshed it. And I can see it over here. Anything here with a little edit field, I can actually edit. So and that item now has pasta, or it is correctly linked to pasta. And so that was, here's the get, create, the edit, and now I can remove it. Be careful with remove, because it does, while it asks very friendly on the front end, I have deleted the content now. That never happened a second time. So I'm going to jump right into the back end of this here. First, I don't know what you guys are talking about. It's fine to me. I guess it's kind of important when I'm showing the back of the code. Be able to read it. Okay, I think you guys can read that, right? Cool. So this is the default index controller action. What it does is it makes the base item, or it calls the connector.getItem, and I'm giving it the GUID of the item I want. That's the home item. Another thing that you could do with it is this is a person item, and I can cast it as a iPerson item. And then I pass it into the model, and that's how I got this ID. A couple other things you could do with it, and this is not anywhere on the front end right now, this is just some examples. You can do the get item, which I just showed. You can also query the item. You can query items also. To create the item, you have to use the item factory to instantiate the interface. And then you can set its values, and then you call the connector to add item. This would be the create call. You can update item by taking an item I already created, giving it new values, and calling update. Or you can delete an item. And this, while testing this function, is how I delete the content out. So when the JSON comes back from Sitecore, it gets serialized and this. It gets serialized as this little class here, which has the database, the data, the display name, children, blah, 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 all the fun stuff that we've all seen before. So this connector response item gets passed to the Sitecore connector. And what this does, I'm only going to show the get.
Use it again? And I'm sorry, switch to time.
I keep forgetting to do that. What was it? It was
175.
I'm trying to find the shortcut.
Control plus.
No, Control Plus is definitely not working.
Two fingers on the pad.
We're good now. We'll do it in the next file. I got one here. This get item call takes in the item ID. It'll get the item response from Sitecore, which will give a string. Then the deserializer will take in the JSON string. It will convert it into a connector response, which becomes a connector response item, and then calls the item factory get items. And this, we're going to try this. Nice. So that was a fun experiment. We're not going to try it again. So the item factory get item will get an item from an interface. It's taken in this connector response, which is again the serialized JSON, and it uses the Castle dynamic proxy to work some magic. Takes it, creates the base item. In this case, because it's called get items, it'll cast them as base item, but you can also cast it as whatever you actually want, as long as it's an interface inherited base item. Creates it, fills in its fields, and magic, returns the enumerable of whatever type you want. So, has anybody here worked with Velir's custom item generator? Yeah, it's fewer than I expected. Cool. So what it does is, for those who don't know it, it can take an item from Sitecore, a template, and it will not magnify it, but it will serialize it, and I've modified it just slightly so it's creating interfaces instead of classes, and so it's actually creating this item based off of a template from Sitecore. It has the matching field names, and it inherits from the address item, which is also so you end up with the person item, which inherits from the address, which inherits from base item. Take my word for it, there's a lot of fields in here.
Can I ask a quick question about the context this code's running in? This is like a IIF server that's totally decoupled from a Sitecore license server, right?
Right. It's
okay.
Yeah, it's connecting. There's no Sitecore DLLs in here at all. It's
Okay.
just,
I was confused because your using statements seem to have a lot of Sitecore.
Yeah.
Those are your own wrappers, apparently.
yeah. So
Okay.
I forgot to mention this earlier. I have the iService connector, which I've implemented it as the Sitecore connector, but I've left it out as an interface in case somebody wants to, for some crazy reason, not use Sitecore. But it is mostly designed to work with Sitecore, but you don't have to.
Thanks.
So, more magic. So the Sitecore connector, I guess while I'm showing this gigantic screen of security, so the difference between the JavaScript implementation and this one in terms of handling security is that I'm not showing this password in plain text in the JavaScript file that everybody can look at. Since this is working as a service, or it's handled through the controller, however you want to use it, all the interactions are handled in the back end. So while the information still gets sent over, you can instead do it over an HTTPS connection, which will kind of hide it a little bit more. Or I believe Sitecore, the instructions on the PDF actually said some other ways of encrypting the credentials. But either way, workspace over here. It's not text. The one last thing I wanted to show was how awesome these unit tests can be because of the legacy object loaded. So, because I got rid of the need for concrete classes, and it's only using interfaces, you have the ability to use these, you can just use end substitute or your favorite mocking thing, mocking tool, and just substitute an item, give it a return value, and just verify that it actually received these calls. It just makes testing a lot more easy than trying to mock up Sitecore data items. That was one of my goals when doing this. So again, in short, there is the, I just went for the basic create, read, upload, update, and delete. And what I got was this. And that is a preview of the code, and it might. So the future. My future goals are to release this on GitHub, and this is going to be very soon. I was meaning to do this, but I haven't done this before. I'm going to polish it up a little bit more, add some documentation around it, and then eventually I'm going to release it on the Sitecore Marketplace and add it to NuKit. And I want to expand on development a little bit more. I want to get maybe past just the CRUD, and then there is, as Jamie mentioned before, this patch, which will actually publish the item, which I want to kind of just play around with a little bit. It also does not have any, it does not grab images just yet, but that is one thing I can work on. This is more just a, hey, I heard about the Sitecore Item API, let's see what I can do. So, I'm going to take any questions. Again, my name is Ben. This is my email address. That's my Twitter and my blog. And I have just a little disclaimer. I've just created this blog. It has one post on it. It's easy. So yeah, any questions? Not one question. I must be a lawyer. Okay. Mike.
All right.
To sleep.
So to get the visual up, do I just plug this in and just work magically, or?
I hope so. There's a lot of magic.
It would be. All right, so take two. I'm Mike Reynolds. I am a tech lead at MedTouch and also the internal Sitecore developer trainer. I pretty much have the privilege of growing new Sitecore developers and pretty much just being a mentor and showing them around and making awesome developers. And I want to give a plug. We're actually hiring. If you want an awesome job, come see me. So pretty much what am I talking about? So pretty much I'm going to show you how to customize a Sitecore Item Web API, doing your own type of whatever you need to do. Mine's going to be a little bit more academic and more boring. Pretty much I'm going to show you something that's probably not very useful, but I did give a presentation on this at the Sitecore Virtual Summit last year where I showed how to actually add that patch request method to do publishing. And I also have a blog post out there. So that might be more useful than what I'm going to show today, but I had no really good idea of what to show that would be useful. So I pretty much, and I'll get to it, and I'm going to actually disclose it right now. So just to give you a little background, Sitecore Item Web API does basic CRUD methods, create, read, update, delete. Pretty much these are the request methods that it will handle, create wants to post, read with you need to pass get, update is put, and then delete is obviously delete. Everything is customizable pipelines. Pretty much you can just tap into everything, and I think that also includes the security stuff. If you need to really change the way that works, you have the option of doing that as well. I don't remember which pipeline it is, but definitely you can just look at the config file and find it. It's named to it at least, so you can see it. So pretty much you can add your own operations here, and so what I'm going to show is how to actually add an Item Web API request pipeline processor to basically pass and delegate onto another pipeline that does cloning. So before I jump into the code, I'm going to just show you what this looks like. I built a nice, beautiful web page. You know, it's definitely awesome. And pretty much you just click the clone button. Has a nice little Ajax spinny. And then it returns some JSON. And I'm using some kind of jQuery plugin to make it look nice so we can read it. So pretty much everything comes back, and I basically cloned one item to two different folders within Sitecore. Let me show you that. Let's do this. Let's log in. But you don't know my password. Alright. So basically what I did is I actually cloned this item here. It has a cat and a hat on it with some content. I cloned it to these two different folders right here. You can tell it's a clone because the source field has something in it and it's pointing, you know, to the item that I cloned. And same thing with this. So pretty much that's all it did. And I'm going to show you the JavaScript really quickly. I'm not a front-end developer. Don't freak out. You know, definitely don't. Yeah, this code is just, you know, to get this up and running. But pretty much all I'm doing is I'm sending an Ajax request using jQuery, where I'm, you know, sending over, you know, the credentials in plain text. You can see them right here. I created a new user for this, you know, for the item web API, and pretty much I'm just, you know, I'm passing over. The item I want to clone, this is what's, this is going to be the contents item. The scope is self. I basically did not allow for multiple axes here, so you can pass in multiple axes using a pipe. So you can do self, parent, child. But I didn't support that in this because it would have been way too complicated. Cloning, I didn't want to go there. Destinations, I pretty much, this is a custom thing I added. Pretty much I'm just like passing in, you know, different parent items, and they're separated by a pipe. And then, you know, send it over to financials, yeah, you know, glazed, and pretty much I'm just like putting it in, you know, in a div, and then I'm using this plugin to make it look pretty. And that's all it's doing, and then it's showing it after it's, you know, populated. So there's nothing really magical here, it's just, you know, it's doing its thing. So one thing to note is I created a custom request method here. So out of the box, like I said, you can do, you know, put, post, get, and do. But you can also add your own. Now I will caution you, it won't work in all browsers. Like all, you know, some browsers will like, hey, that's not a standard request method. No. But in Chrome it works, so that's why I can show you this. In reality, you may want to like have something like this work for a console application or something that's not browser-based in order to like populate things with inside. And then I also said, yeah, I want to do recursive cloning here. I'm not recursive cloning anything because there were no child, you know, descendants for those, you know, that item. Actually, no, I'm sorry, there were. I'm wrong. It actually cloned poetry. I forgot I changed this the other day. So yeah, I cloned all of these items that came from here, this whole subtree. All right, so let's jump into some code. So actually, before I show you the code, I want to just show you what the config looks like so that, you know, it will make more sense when we go and look at it. So pretty much, you know, all requests go through this pipeline to Sitecore Item Web API.
Could you go magnify a little bit?
Sure. That doesn't look at me either. How's that?
Thanks.
All right. So our requests make their way through this pipeline and hit Sitecore Item Web API. I'm pretty much, I created my own pipeline processor for this, and I'm putting it right before the resolve action pipeline processor, which I believe might be the last pipeline processor in this pipeline. I put it right before it so I can intercept, you know, my custom request method over Sitecore's, and then handle it or not handle it, like pass it to the next. What this does is I'm passing in using Sitecore's configuration factory. I'm passing in two properties into this So I'm checking for the request method, and then multiple items in there. Pretty much I'm doing a split on this in the code so that I can grab the destinations. This actually delegates to this guy. This is a custom pipeline that I built for this. And it has two processors, which I'll show you. One does exactly what it says right here, it clones items. And then I set the result so that I can pass it back to the Sitecore Item Web API so it can convert it to JSON. Has everybody built a custom pipeline before? Right. And so you guys, won't think I'm totally crazy when I show this. So I'm going to show you the Item Web API request processor that I built. Basically, it inherits from this base class. A lot of things in the Sitecore Item Web API have base classes you should inherit from in order for things to work. I inherited from that because I'm Java in a particular pipeline. Pretty much all I'm doing is saying, hey, should I actually process this? I mean, this is just checking, the actual request method. And then I'm also making sure that there aren't multiple scopes being passed in multiple axes because I'm not going to handle it. Would have been too complicated. You guys would probably fall asleep. And then I make sure, there are actually items in scope. If there aren't, I log a message, log a line into the log file. And then I just, say no, we can't process this and just, move on. Pretty much, I grab the destination items where I'm doing, a split on, the destination square parameter that's passed in. I'm pretty much using some sloppy code here to grab the items from the context database for the Sitecore Item Web API. So this actually is available to you through the API. When you grab, from the current context, it's looking at the SC database query string to determine what the database is. Pass it back, and pretty much just like, create a pipeline arcs for my custom pipeline that I built. Passing, in the items that I want to clone, destinations, and then, whether or not I should clone recursively. And then I run the pipeline. That's pretty much all that's doing. So the first pipeline processor. So before I actually jump into that, I had to create, pipeline arcs for this. Pretty much, I had to inherit from base class, like I said. Sitecore Item Web API has a lot of base classes you should inherit from, and these are abstract. So, there are things you may have to implement, maybe not. And then I added a couple properties here. Destinations is recursive, and then I basically return a collection of the cloned items. It basically changed it in here and just put it in the property. And then I created a base processor for my clone pipeline, which inherits from this one that's a base class, in Sitecore Item Web API, and it wants a type for your arguments. It's pretty much, nothing to this. It's not really that complicated here. But so this is the first pipeline processor that runs for cloning. Pretty much, we just make sure things being passed, and then we iterate over all items that should be cloned, and then we basically just clone to the destinations that we're supplying. Basically, I'm just using the Sitecore API to clone to a destination and whether or not I should clone all descendants. Then the next pipeline processor for this pipeline, basically it's just setting the result. Pretty much what I have to do is I basically, have to make sure there is a result. I mean, if there's, if there is no result already set, do something. If there's something already set, leave it alone, because it might have been handled by another pipeline processor somewhere else. This gives you the ability to make this, scale. And then I basically pass in the cloned items to the Item Web API read pipeline, which actually will, read those items, and I think it converts it to JSON. I think this is the pipeline that does it. I could be wrong, though. I think that's why I had to do this. And basically just return it back. It creates an object. It's actually a wrapper object that comes with the Sitecore Item Web API that basically magically gets serialized into JSON. I don't remember what that object was. It's a certain wrapper that they created for this. And pretty much, that's it. It all goes back to, here, and then we set the result that was, the wrapper object, and just pass it on to the rest of the pipeline, and just let it handle it, and then it basically will, do the serialization, and return it back to the caller. So that's pretty much it for this code. I mean, there really isn't a lot here. I know it looks like it could be a little complicated, but you know, it's really not that hard to wire up any operations here. You can add anything that you want. You know, within limits. You know, you don't want to make requests from maybe IE. So there are some resources out there that you guys definitely want to have a look. There's a couple, you know, there are blog resources out there. So the first link is a blog post written by Michalski, who works at Sitecore. He pretty much just gave more of an overview, and he actually made a blog as well, that's right included here. And then the next link is pretty much, it's a tag of all Sitecore Item Web API blog posts I've written up to date. I have a bunch out there you definitely want to take a look at, and I pretty much just talk about customizations like this or other things that you do, changing up the serializer, you know, things like that. I've covered all that in the blog, the patch publishing pipeline, things like that. There's some presentations out there that were given in the past that you definitely want to have a look at. So this top one was given by Karen Nightingale, who was a former employee of Sitecore UK. He gave a nice overview of the Sitecore Item Web API. Definitely, you know, I looked at that before I even knew what I was doing. I learned a lot from this presentation. And then this one is actually a presentation I gave at the virtual summit last year. It's out on YouTube. You can definitely check it out. I covered a lot about, you know, basic overview of the Sitecore Item Web API and customizations. And I also covered the serialization stuff in there and patch publishing. Get in touch. You know, if you have any questions, you can send me an email. You can tweet me. That's probably the best option to find me. Go on my blog. If you write a comment, I will respond. You know, I try to keep up to date with that stuff as much as possible. And you know, you can always connect with me on LinkedIn, but definitely Twitter's probably the best, you know, place to find me. Any questions? Yes.
I have a question about reliability of the Web API. What's been your experience with different versions of Sitecore?
I have not seen it change, you know, from when it was a package versus being out of the box now. It looks like it's the same. I could be wrong. I did not do a diff on the code, but I did a diff on the config, and it was the same config. So I'm assuming the code is almost the same. There might be minor refactorings. Nothing is big, you know, nothing major has changed. So there are no breaking changes anywhere.
I asked because I inferred from something in the Meetup thread that someone had found that it had some issues at first.
I don't, and I actually asked about that. I never got a response on that because I was curious what those issues were.
You know, there are two different versions of the API. There's 1 and 1.1. You don't know which.
Right.
The one I was demonstrating on, I think was the same one Jamie was on, was version 1. I think Sitecore 7 and above uses 1.1. I think that one's available by package also.
Is it really?
Something that was prevented by things. Oh, we needed to have Sitecore 6.6, the latest patch.
Yeah, I think I did a diff between 1.0 and 1.1. Didn't really see much of a difference. Maybe there were differences, maybe code changes that were, you know, fixed. I don't really know. Any other questions?
I have one question.
No.
What do you see as like the biggest breakthrough for this service, Sitecore as a service? I mean, have you tried anything with native mobile devices that you have? You're previewing your basic root operations, but is there any kind of examples that you've seen that have been that have not been really implemented yet?
That have not been implemented yet?
Yeah. Any kind of ideas?
So yeah, I mean,
Blood flow.
So I mean, I added customizations to it because I needed it to work. I mean, we built an importer for physicians,
Yeah.
where we read from, you know, a data source. Could be a web service, could be an Excel document, could be anything. And pretty much we had to add things into the Sitecore Item Web API to make our import work.
Okay, so it's data import.
Yeah, so you know, we've successfully used it for data importer.
We've had clients that you know, haven't really enjoyed the desktop or editor experience in Sitecore. Maybe it's like a user who uses Sitecore once every 3 months, and you know, maybe there's a lot of those users, and they don't want to spend the time training them. or feel like they can't train them, for whatever reason. So creating like really like friendly task-based interfaces, so you can only do these 4 things when you're creating content. I think I can see that being like a really good use case for this. So you do have all the control over the UI. They can only do these few things, and that's the rail they're on. I can see that being a nice use for what.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. And also, pretty much it's just, if you need to pull in content from Sitecore from outside of Sitecore, well, you have the option of using this, right there. It's native. So.
On that note, how do you find the performance of this? Because what I could see really using this for is if you have a really complicated front-end, like Angular-based web app, where basically you want to use Sitecore as like a content repository, but you don't necessarily want to be adding presentation settings to every single item that every user is going to be going into, and you want the front end to really manage grabbing that data. But with that, I could see like the performance of possibly having to grab a whole bunch of items at once, or...
Well, with the presentation, you put that on the template, and then it would just, get inherited on the item. So you wouldn't have to worry about that. But, I can see what you're saying, though. If you had to, make a ton of changes, yeah. I don't have any numbers, but, our performance on our import is pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, we haven't had any major issues with performance. I think when you start pulling down thousands of items, which we did, then you start to see some lag. But if you're talking about hundreds of items, I don't think there'll be any issue.
I can add a little bit to this. We found out that the Item API, when you're at least just getting items, it does cache it on the server side. So that is a little bit of a boost for performance. And Jamie showed that you can actually, if you only wanted a certain amount of fields, you can also just limit the fields you're showing. And for my implementation, because I wanted to get that whole Sitecore tree, I implemented lazy loading for the parent and the children. Just so it only actually loaded one. So there's a bunch of different ways, but for the limited scope that I did, and I think the scope that Jamie did, we didn't see a problem.
Is there any limitations on what type of items you can pull in? And you've talked about content items, but does this item API extend to templates, workflow, systems, like something in the system folder?
I don't see any issue. I think you can pull down anything. I have never actually tried that, but I believe you can.
You can target core, so I see no reason why you couldn't.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So when you see Sitecore as a CMS, the main 3 functions are you load the content, you preview and publish it. When we built the UI outside to load the content, but if there's a real web page where I have to preview, how do we achieve that? Yeah, you can read and see what you loaded. That's different from previewing in a real web page. So that's what the main thing in Sitecore is. You preview, you see the real page internally, and then if everything is okay, somebody might pull the trigger, publish it. So if you build outside Sitecore, how do you achieve that function of preview and publish?
So how do you do
preview and publish?
So I don't know if there's a way to do preview. Maybe you can just, you'd have to build something on your own to pretty much just populate something to display it. And definitely, I can see that being a major undertaking. Publish, you can grow your own pipeline to do publishing. I blogged about it in one of those presentations. I showed that. You can definitely, take a look at that, and you can see how to do the patch request method to do publishing. Now, patch is supported by all browsers because that's actually a standard for request methods for services like this.
I know the preview functionality is just a link really too. So assuming that you had to log in to edit, and you are logged in, or the app has your credentials, you can just send them over to that preview link, and they should be able to see the site in preview mode.
And we could also switch to the database, right? There's a database parameter which can switch between the purposes,
It's kind of also, if you want to just do a makeshift publish, you could just kind of push the item to both master and
Not sure I like that.
That's how I was doing it for the demo originally, and then I said, I'm just going to go with master. They don't need to publish it. But yeah, patch should be going.
Any other questions?